Tianbao Fu Yao Lu. Chapter 183. Mutual Causes and Effects. Li Jinglong gestured for Hung Jun to follow him, and after Hung Jun cleaned up a little, he followed behind Li Jinglong as they walked towards the canyon behind the mountains behind Mount Li. There was a pine tree there, with a patch of rock under it. It was at this very spot, years ago, that he had bid Chongming farewell while Li Jinglong stood behind him, silently waiting for him. Li Jinglong sat down and patted his thigh, saying, "Sit on me. Are you feeling a little better?" Hung Jun asked. "Can you take it?" Li Jinglong replied, "Then shall I sit on you?" And saying that, he rose and let Hung Jun sit down. Hung Jun sat on that rock, while Li Jinglong sat in Hung Jun's lap. He took Hung Jun's hands and wrapped them around his own waist, the two of them watching the vast sky above. This was the first time that Hung Jun was doing something like this, and he felt that it was a pretty refreshing experience. As he held Li Jinglong, that unease in his heart slowly ebbed away, replaced by an echoing sense of hollowness. Despite having gone through so much, they were still by each other's sides. Hung Jun had too many things he wanted to say, but the thousands of words that bubbled in his heart condensed down to a simple 5. "I missed you so much." "I missed you so much as well," Li Jinglong replied absently. The two of them leaned up against each other just like this, watching the peaks beyond the end of the cliffs. The fog slowly dissipated, revealing a sweep of green mountains and a blazing morning sun. It was at this moment that Hung Jun felt there was nothing that needed to be said. Everything in the past was already in the past, and the future that stretched in front of them, at least, was filled with hope. "When I think about how we will have many more years together in these lives of ours," Li Jinglong said, turning his head to glance at Hung Jun, "I can't help feeling so happy that I want to laugh." The sorrow that filled Hung Jun's lungs were swept away in that instant, and his heart felt as if it was a fresh, new sky that had been cleansed by the rain. He couldn't resist chuckling at that as he replied, "Did I promise you that?" "Oh." Li Jinglong nudged Hung Jun's head forcefully. "Who did you learn that from? Now you know how to talk back to me. Get up." Hung Jun shoved at Li Jinglong, trying to get him to stand up. Li Jinglong, however, pressed Hung Jun down, saying, "Your husband, your Zhenji, am brimming with as much vitality as a tiger or a dragon, yet you think I'm still at your mercy." Hung Jun and Li Jinglong began to wrestle and try to trip each other under that pine tree just like two little children would. Li Jinglong yanked his leg down around Hung Jun's foot, and Hung Jun lost his balance. As he fell backwards, Li Jinglong grabbed him around the waist and planted a light kiss to his lips. A long while later, Li Jinglong lay under the tree, and Hung Jun lay in Li Jinglong's arms. Hung Jun then began to speak of his dream that day, all the way to Li Jinglong's dreamscape. When it came time for Li Jinglong to speak, however, Hung Jun was stunned. You changed the past?" Hung Jun asked, shocked. Li Jinglong smiled gently as he made a shush sound as he replied, "But what you remember is still that same stretch of days." Blurrily, Hung Jun could still remember those memories when his father and mother had died at Li Jinglong's hands, but aside from that, he could also vaguely sense everything that Li Jinglong had done in his dream. A strange and wondrous series of causes and effects stacked on top of each other, finally bringing about the conclusion that deviated wildly from the expected during the Ungshi rebellion. "And that's to say," Hung Jun said, 100 thoughts clamoring for understanding in his head, "you were originally supposed to inherit the 6 artifacts of Akalanatha and in the chaos of the battle for Chang'an, kill me. But instead, you went back to the past and prayed to Akalanatha, so he scattered all of the artifacts." "That's right," Li Jinglong replied. He continued, a little sorrowful still, "But I don't understand why your parents aren't alive." Hung Jun was a little melancholy as he replied, "Chongming told me before that the saying, 'Those that die cannot be revived,' in the eyes of mortals, is something that is natural and expected. But amongst the Yao clan, or even with the gods, this is also a natural law that cannot be defied. The souls of the deceased will enter the divine vein, and no matter how strong any cause and effect is, it cannot call those souls back. Li Jinglong said, so, I have changed every part of the past that I could have, except for the fates of your parents. But our present is the present that exists after our destinies were changed, Hung Jun continued. That is to say, from the day that I arrived at Chang'an onwards, our fates have traveled along the path that has been decreed according to the past that you changed. But when you got to the end of that path, you returned to the past to change it. Wait, that isn't right, is it? How is that not right? Li Jinglong replied, completely serious. The me of the past has traveled along to the present, only to then turn back and fix things. That brought about the path that we traveled together, the path that the heart lamp gave me. This is a loop, and only by turning back has the current me decided the past me. If the current me hadn't pleaded with Akalanatha, the past me wouldn't have obtained the heart lamp. The past and the present have become mutually intertwined as causes and effects, which is the true principle behind how fate was changed. Hung Jun seemed to understand that a little bit, but he was also even more confused now. Upon seeing that his expression was one of complete confusion, Li Jinglong explained, let me give an example. Let's say that I gathered the 6 artifacts and inherited the power of Akalanatha, only then to realize that something was not right. In the end, I would end up killing you with my own hands. But then I felt regret, and I would hope to go back to the past and change how things played out, isn't that right? That's right, Hung Jun nodded. Li Jinglong continued, then say if I were to go back to the past, and Akalanatha agreed to my request, then the me of the present would suddenly lose my weapons. That's right. Hung Jun said. That is the most logical outcome. Li Jinglong chuckled. Then, having the cause destroyed also means that, along the way, I wouldn't have gotten any of the artifacts to begin with. But if I didn't have the artifacts to begin with, how would I have thought of going back to the past to change this cause? Hung Jun. And that is why, Li Jinglong said, only when the past and the future become each other's cause and effect can destiny be changed, and thus avert any conflicts with each other. The Kun god saw 2 possible futures. One of the futures involved you turning into Mara and dying, but the other future was of you living. To achieve the future where you would live, I would need to go back to the past, give up on the artifacts, and choose the heart lamp. This was the key point upon which everything else hinged. With that, the Kun god began to lay out his preparations to disturb the order of causes and effects by asking Qingxiang to seal away our memories, before then handing the heart lamp over to you so you could bring it to Chang'an. And after that, upon finding out that I would be unable to gain the artifacts of Akala, what would replace it would be the fact that I have the heart lamp. All of these key factors are gathering towards this circular loop, Li Jinglong said. He looked into Hung Jun's confused eyes and made a gesture as he smiled. In the end, the Zhuangzhou's butterfly dream spell let me fill in that last missing piece, which then gave birth to the conditions needed to turn the past and the future into the causes and effects of each other. Oh well, all right, I was wrong, I shouldn't have explained all of this to you. At least everything is over now, aside from a few parts that I regret. Hung Jun said, I've decided to go ask Yang Sigur instead. He explains it a little simpler than you do. Li Jinglong had been utterly defeated, and he was torn between laughing and crying. At a moment like this, he had actually lost to Qiu Yangxi. Lie down, lie on me, Li Jinglong gestured at Hung Jun. It doesn't hurt anymore. With that, Hung Jun undid the ties to Li Jinglong's outer and inner robes. Li Jinglong, however, chuckled. I told you to lie on me, not to take off my clothes. What are you doing now, you little pervert? Hung Jun pressed the side of his head against Li Jinglong's chest, feeling the powerful beat of his heart underneath his warm skin. His heart felt as it always had, like a ball of burning fire but also like a brilliant sun that was shining into his very soul. I like being alive, Hung Jun said. Being alive is so nice. He and Li Jinglong's breaths mingled, and they began to exchange kisses under the tree. They seemed to never want to stop, and the sensation of their chests pressed together and their lips touching made Hung Jun feel as if he was really and truly living in this world. Li Jinglong felt that this constant kissing was a little unbearable, and he took a moment to breathe, saying, "Let's continue talking about this tonight. We have a lot more time left. What will we do after this?" Hung Jun asked. "Will we go back to Chang'an?" "We won't." Li Jinglong tilted his head down to gaze passionately into Hung Jun's eyes. A moment later, he asked, "What did Qing Xiang tell you to do?" Hung Jun remembered, and he said the Yao tribes hope to re-enter the human realm, so he wanted me to go discuss with the emperor about giving us a place to live. It was as Li Jinglong had expected, he had guessed it was something like this beforehand. Hung Jun remembered when he had come down the mountain, many years ago, that of the 3 tasks Zhongming had given him, one was to expel Xiaoyu and resettle into the divine land. But how could it be that easy, letting the Yao tribes and the humans live side by side? The most important thing was not how they would exist but rather who they would make the agreement with, that from now on, the Yao tribes and the humans would evenly divide, no, evenly enjoy the fertile lands of the divine land. Do you know what this symbolizes? Li Jinglong teased Hung Jun amusedly, swiping a finger down the side of his handsome cheek. Hung Jun replied easily, "I know. The Yao King being together with the Zenshi of the exorcism department is a symbol of the cooperation and friendliness between our two peoples." Li Jinglong was stunned. Was that also something Qing Xiang said? Hung Jun hid his smile and he glanced at Li Jinglong, saying, "I guessed as much." Sometimes, Li Jinglong thought that Hung Jun stumbled around pretty blindly, but sometimes he felt that he was extraordinarily smart. He asked, "Does this count as a marriage alliance, or something else?" Hung Jun asked in return, "Can it count as one?" Li Jinglong replied, "What if I said that it can't count?" Hung Jun pointed out, "We aren't guests to the divine land." This sentence came as an unexpected shock to Li Jinglong, but when he thought about Zhongming and how Hung Jun had come down the mountain bearing the tasks that Zhongming had bestowed upon him from the very start, this was also an expected outcome. He quashed his urge to ask the inappropriate question of, "If you had to pick between the Yao tribes and me, which would you pick?" But when he looked inside himself, he figured that if he truly loved someone, then he shouldn't make him choose, so Li Jinglong decided not to voice that. "Generation after generation, we have lived on this vast divine land," Hung Jun said, sitting up. He folded his legs and sat up, turning to look at Li Jinglong as he continued, "The Yao tribes and humans can coexist without conflict, isn't that so? We only have one enemy, devils." "That's right," Li Jinglong replied earnestly. "I will do my utmost. I imagine that right now, what the Crown Prince says goes. If we want the human realm to remain peaceful and without incident, then this pact would have to be formed sooner or later anyway. The way it has fallen now to you is something that has been decided by destiny. If we can't make it work, I'll still like you just the same." Hung Jun moved forward and gently pressed a kiss to Li Jinglong's lips. Li Jinglong's face immediately flared red at that, and Hung Jun pointed at him, laughing at him. All Li Jinglong felt was that after this great battle, Hung Jun seemed to have grown up, and he also seemed to have gained a lot of worries. Plus, he sometimes seemed to be in the mood to cause mischief. He reached out and pulled him right into his arms, pressing him down against the tree and kissing him. The two of them kissed for a moment before Li Jinglong undid his robes again, and ignoring the fact that the sky and the earth were witnessing this, began to get intimate with him. Mo Rijin and Lu Su soaked in the hot springs, while Chen Feng sat on a stone to the side, playing with the water. "Why do we have to look after a kid?" Mo Rijin asked. "What does it have to do with you?" Lu Su shot back expressionlessly. "I like to do so." Chen Feng glanced at Mo Rijin, and Mo Rijin immediately threw his hands up in surrender. It was already so hard to hold himself back, and he had originally thought that after the battle was over, he would be able to get intimate with Lu Su for several days. He hadn't thought that wherever Lu Su went, he would bring Chen Feng along to take care of him. Chen Feng was also very cute, and Mo Rijin felt as if he couldn't stoop to raging at a kid. Chen Feng asked, "Do you dislike me?" "No, of course not," Mo Rijin replied. Chen Feng reminded him of his youngest brother back home, so he reached out and nabbed a leaf that he folded into a little boat for Chen Feng to play with. Chen Feng pushed that boat back and forth, moving it back and forth across the waters of the hot springs. Mo Rijin took that moment that his attention was diverted to lean forward a little and press up against Lu Su. "At night," Lu Su said coldly. "Otherwise I'll shout." Mo Rijin had no choice but to let it be. He pressed one hand to his forehead and moaned, "Why are you like this?" A cunning glint of mirth flashed through Lu Su's eyes, before he met Mo Rijin's gaze. In that brief moment, both of their faces turned red, and they both turned their heads away, pretending as if nothing had happened. As night fell, everyone had cleaned up the beds in the walking palace, and they also had cooked a meal. Ashinakayan had even dug out the wine that Li Longji had stashed away, and he patted away the dirt, sealing it away. With that, the exorcists had a merry meal to celebrate this true reunion and their temporary victory. "The wine's still here," Li Jinglong said, shaking his head as he watched the amber hue of the fine wine in his cup, "but the royal family has long since fled like a dog with its tail between its legs." Chu Yangxi remarked, "Throughout the ages of the human realm, new dynasties will rise and fall. Isn't that always the case? Vast seas become mulberry fields, and rivers change their paths. Everything changes in the span of a single breath. Only the moon and the sun still rise in the east and set in the west, that is eternal." "That's true," Li Jinglong said, smiling. "In these past few days, everyone's worked hard. No need to say any more. I salute you all with this cup." All of the pain and suffering, joy and sorrow that they had experienced on their journey here had been gathered in this one cup, and from this day on, bliss would come from the depths of misfortune. Li Jinglong then led the group in a toast to the countless citizens and valiant souls that had perished in the mountains, under the cover of the night, and those that had perished at the foot of Mount Li, in the city of Chang'an. As night fell, Chang'an was still shrouded in devil qi as it always had been, filled with a demonic and ghost-like energy. And Lushan had absorbed the resentment of almost 1 million people as he cut a vast swathe through the land, and all of that had exploded out of him in an instant within the city. The results were then, obviously, stunning to even the ghosts and gods that resided in this realm. The sun, the moon, and the stars, as well as the divine and earth veins, were unable to fully cleanse that. From the looks of it, things were truly going as Jing Xiang had predicted. It would take 3 years for Chang'an to regain its original demeanor. "There's no way to reside in Chang'an any longer," Li Jinglong said. "Everything from here all the way to Luoyang is all filled with devil qi. Moreover, it's not a good place to stay after all the chaos of war. Should we go to Hangzhou?" Chu Yangxi asked. "If we head towards Hangzhou, the Hangzhou Manor at the foot of the Dragon Subduing Tower is a good place to live." Li Jinglong searched his thoughts for a moment. Mo Rijin said, "Wherever everyone else goes, I'll go." Lu Su added, "As long as we're not going to Yadan, then I'm fine. I don't want to go back." Hung Jun said, "The Taihang Mountains were originally pretty good, but the Ghost King and the rest of them can't get up there. And though Yajin Palace is pretty, it's too inconvenient to climb up and down every day." Li Jinglong originally wanted to move the exorcism department somewhere new first, then start the negotiation with Li Longji about selecting a place which he could then rule over. He would then let the Yao tribes live on his own lands. As for everything else, there was no need to bring up too much, so as to prevent any complications from arising. Moreover, if he was to explain, he would be explaining to the Crown Prince Li Hung instead. Of course, he would only do so under the condition that the information shared was to be kept strictly between the two of them. Atai asked, How about everyone head out of the Yang Pass? Why not come with me to revive my country? Everyone booed him for saying nonsense. Who'd be able to make it back if we had to go out of the pass with you for a good few years? Li Jinglong mused for a bit more, before finally saying, I have something, but I don't know if I should say it or not. All of the exorcists' mouths twitched at the corners. Li Jinglong would actually say such a thing? If this was before, he wouldn't ask for any of their opinions. He would have just gone right to making a decision. Then don't say it, the Carpiao said. Once you think of how to say it, then try again. Li Jinglong. Are you looking to die? Chen Feng asked. How dare you speak to our honored benefactor in that way? The Carpiao protested, he's your honored benefactor, not mine. Chen Feng, he is the honored benefactor of the entire world. I personally witnessed how he defeated the evil chancellor. Everyone immediately burst out laughing. Though Chen Feng was young, his temper was no joke. The Carpiao had also met its mortal weakness, because every time it tried to bicker, it found that it had no ground to stand on. When it had been just Li Jinglong, he avoided admonishing it for Hung Jun's sake. Now that Chen Feng was here, he could give voice to what they had all been thinking. Here's how things are. Upon seeing that the Carpiao was speechless, Li Jinglong felt a sense of hidden glee, before he continued to explain to the rest of them, though everyone has defeated Mara solely for the sake of the people in this world, and are not subjects of my great Tang, you still earn salaries from the imperial court. That was the case. They had taken their money but also saved them from disaster. All of the exorcists nodded at that, and Li Jinglong continued, but after all, our work here is not yet done. His Majesty has not yet passed his throne down to the Crown Prince, so I think we should first check out the situation in Chengdu. Everyone agreed to that. Li Jinglong then explained how the Yao tribes wished to return to the Divine Land and no longer wanted to have to hide themselves. This proposal was within the bounds of reason, and though the Yao kings and the exorcists had once been at odds, they were now allies. Additionally, now that Hung Jun was, in name, their leader, this was a proposal that could be acceptable. The lands of Shu were far from the central plains, but they were the lands of milk and honey. The region around the entrance to Shu was covered in high mountains and lofty peaks wreathed in clouds, and the mountains were often utterly devoid of any human presence. If they could get a piece of the land there from Li Longji for the Yao tribes to live in, there was very little chance that the Yao tribes would come into conflict with the humans ever again. The Yaos and humans would each be able to live on their own, and the Great Tang would be able to recoup its strength again, awaiting the arrival of a glorious leader that would then bring the Great Tang into a new splendid era. With that, everyone decided that they would first head towards Chengdu. Hung Jun had never been to Beiyou before, but through descriptions he heard, he thought that it was a very beautiful place. To him, it was like a fairy realm on earth, and he was also captivated by the poem The Hard Path to Shu, written by Li Bai, so he was carried away by his imagination. After this battle of theirs, everyone was also happy to go on a vacation and relax a little. End chapter. Tianbao Fu Yao Lu. Chapter 184. Unfinished Prior Fate. That night, the exorcists greatly enjoyed themselves and went to bed in drunken stupors. The mountain wind blew through the trees, sending their branches and leaves rustling. In the bedroom, Morijin and Lu Su were on the ground, in the middle of tangling with each other, while Chen Feng lay on the bed, soundly asleep. Morijin groped around, but just as he was about to enter, Chen Feng suddenly said something in his sleep and greatly startled Lu Su. "Let's send him back," Morijin said. "If he wakes up in the middle of the night and sees this fight, that's not good for a kid." Lu Su had no choice but to motion for Morijin to take him back, so Morijin carried Chen Feng to Li Jinglong's door. He made a shh gesture as Li Jinglong, with his chest bare, came out of the room. "You guys are done?" Morijin asked. Li Jinglong nodded, and Morijin swiftly handed over this hot potato to Li Jinglong and he said, It's my turn now. Don't bring him back. Li Jinglong chuckled as he took Chen Feng, while Mo Rijin whisked the door shut with one foot before speedily rushing back to attend to Lu Su. Hung Jun's eyes were still bleary with sleep and he mumbled out a question. Li Jinglong set Chen Feng down, and Chen Feng, still bleary with sleep as well, would hug whoever he saw, so he latched onto Hung Jun and did not let go. Li Jinglong was filled with envy at the sight of that, and he pried Chen Feng away a little, before lifting the blankets up and lying down to sleep as well. Late into the night, Li Jinglong suddenly woke up for no reason. He opened his eyes and for some reason, he remembered that night that Hung Jun left him and headed towards the tall cliff. He felt as if something was currently letting out low rumbles of resonance in the distance. Just as he rose, he saw the sword of wisdom pulsing with light. Li Jinglong. With the sword of wisdom in hand, he turned towards the outside of the room. When he turned in a certain direction, the light of the sword of wisdom intensified, and Li Jinglong immediately pushed the door open and went out, heading towards that pulsing light. He swiftly crossed through the corridor, heading towards a side hall. His surroundings were desolate. Tables, lounge chairs, and drapes lay scattered over the ground. A beam of golden light was shining out of the side hall of the Huaqing Palace. When Li Jinglong hurriedly pushed open the door and went inside, what he saw right in front of him was a statue of Akalanatha, positioned loftily within the hall. The last time he had come to Huaqing Palace, he hadn't discovered this statue. That was why he figured that after all the ruckus that Wu Qiu had caused last time, a coppersmith had been invited in from who knows where to create it, as a way to ward off evil. At this moment, however, Akalanatha had actually appeared in front of Li Jinglong, and was currently looking him over. Li Jinglong's upper body was still bare, and he didn't know what best to do. After a moment of thought, he knelt down in front of Akalanatha, placing the sword of wisdom in front of his folded knees. Oh great Wisdom King! This was not the first time that Li Jinglong was speaking to Akalanatha, but every time, he had met him hastily, so he didn't know how to address him. He had no choice now but to fumble for an address to use for now. Mahamayuri will no longer become the bearer of the devil seed, Akalanatha said. The heavy burden of bearing the resentment of all living beings has now become a conundrum that remains to be solved. This is your choice, but the impact it will cause on the eternal future, as well as on further generations, runs deep and must not be underestimated. Li Jinglong remained silent and deep in thought. Akalanatha continued, the past successors of my divine power have never had a desire like yours. This is something that even I, in the past, have not been able to accomplish. Li Jinglong couldn't tell in the moment whether Akalanatha was praising him or admonishing him, so he had no choice but to reply, this junior remains in awe. With the power of the heart lamp, you have temporarily stamped out the devil seed, Akalanatha said. But 365 days later, the devil seed's process of self-restoration will be completed. Li Jinglong, you have 1 year's worth of time. Li Jinglong. Li Jinglong thought, no way, really. At least let me get a few days of rest first before you tell me this news. As for the rest of the artifacts, I imagine you have long since learned of their whereabouts, Akalanatha said. After all, it was you yourself who asked me to spread the 6 artifacts across those of the exorcism department. That's right. Wait, through dreams, when he had returned to the past, Li Jinglong had in fact been the one to propose this, but as for where exactly the 6 artifacts had ended up, he didn't have a clue. Gather the 6 artifacts, Akalanatha said, reaching out a hand. Inherit the sword of wisdom. 1 year later, your victory or defeat will depend on this one battle. In this moment, though you have obtained a preliminary victory, there is still a chance that you shall plummet into a bottomless abyss in the future. Remember this. Akalanatha splayed his huge palm out in front of Li Jinglong. Li Jinglong was stunned. Within that palm, a fiery red bird lay quietly. This is the phoenix, as the ruler of the skies, does not return to the cycles of reincarnation. I shall hand him over to you for now. The bonds of fate that attach him to Mahamayuri have not yet come to an end. Li Jinglong took that fledgling phoenix that was no larger than 3 of his fingers. Akalanatha then scattered into golden powder, which formed a river of gold that vanished into the air. The fledgling phoenix lay quietly in the palms of Li Jinglong's hands. It never opened its eyes, keeping its head buried under its wing from start to finish. The next day, the boat set off on its journey, crossing the Jing River Canal into the Changjiang, heading down south as it prepared to pass through Jingzhou. It would then take the waterways into the Shu region, which would spare them the effort of having to cross the path so difficult it was like the path to the heavens, the ancient Chuansha path. At the foot of Mount Li Jinglong found a boatsman that had yet to flee very far. The boatsman had been staying here to observe the situation. They were originally planning to head back to Chang'an to take a look, but with the power of money, Li Jinglong swayed some of them into taking the group of exorcists into Shu County on their boats. And Chongming had returned to them as well. Upon seeing the fledgling phoenix, the group was quite terrified. Such a pretty bird, Chen Feng said. Huh? Why are you all hiding so far away? On the boat, a summer breeze blew lightly by. Chen Feng held a chopstick, wanting to go and bother the bird with it, only for everyone to hurriedly stop him. They didn't dare to rouse even a single hair on the tiger's head. It's my dad. Hung Jun set down the scroll in his hands and came to the table. Li Jinglong had formed a simple nest out of an outer robe, and he had placed the phoenix inside it. Ever since he returned last night, this fiery red bird with such vivid feathers had not eaten or drunk anything, as if it was sitting quietly in meditation. Is your dad a bird? Chen Feng asked, very curious. Aren't you an exorcist? This question was something that Hung Jun really couldn't find any answer to, but Chen Feng had seen many things over the course of the days he had been here, so he already had the dim outline of an answer in his heart. Hung Jun simply chuckled and replied, that's right. May I take a look? The phoenix of the past had already vanished. What had taken its place was this quiet fledgling. The rest of them didn't dare to tease the phoenix. One was because it was once Hung Jun's adoptive father, and the second was that despite having undergone nirvana, no one knew how much Yao power it now had. If it began to breathe flames on the deck of the boat, that was no joke. Third was that if they accidentally ended up angering it and it flew away with a few flaps of its wings, Hung Jun might not ever be able to find it again, and he would hate them for the rest of his life. It has nothing to do with me, Li Jinglong said hurriedly. Akalanatha just told me to hand him over, so now he's been handed over to you. Everyone scattered, leaving behind the Carpiao, Chen Feng, and Hung Jun to study that bird. Hung Jun reached out a finger and gently nudged the fledgling, saying quietly, Hey, Dad. It no longer remembers you. Qing Xiang's words resounded in his ear, but Hung Jun still held out a slight sliver of hope. The phoenix, however, did not pay any attention to him at all. Hung Jun watched it fixedly, 100 emotions swirling about in his heart, and he felt a sense of grief well up. Why don't you give it a name? Chen Feng asked. Does it have a name? Hung Jun originally wanted to say that it had a name, but when he thought about it, he gave up on that idea. It doesn't, Hung Jun said. Why don't we call it Gui Lai? Phoenix, oh Phoenix, you have returned to your home at last. You have wandered across the world, seeking only your other half, Chen Feng recited. Hung Jun was stunned, but when he thought about it from a different perspective, though Chen Feng's family had fallen in the world, they were still the descendants of the great literary Chen Suiang, so this wasn't something that should be shocking. That's right, Hung Jun said, starting to smile. That is the meaning here. It did still return. Hung Jun set Gui Lai down by the side of the bed, and he and Chen Feng watched it for a while. The fledgling phoenix was still sleeping, ignoring everyone as it did. With that, Hung Jun decided not to disturb it, instead leaving Chen Feng behind to stare at this bird curiously. Li Jinglong sat on the gunwale of the boat, watching the two banks. The ship had just left Mount Li and both sides of the river were pitch black. Yesterday night, Akalanatha's warning had made him start to worry again. There was 1 year left, and they would have to go find the other 3 artifacts. If their luck was good. But already, Li Jinglong no longer really believed in his own luck. For any matter at hand, if things started shifting towards the worst outcome, it was guaranteed that it would be what happened in the end. Hung Jun looked all around for Li Jinglong. The sound of Chu Yangxi plucking the strings of the qin traveled to them from inside the main cabin, and Li Jinglong glanced at Hung Jun, before beginning to chuckle. "There's something I want to discuss with you." Li Jinglong gestured for Hung Jun to come over. As long as Chen Feng wasn't around, he couldn't resist hugging Hung Jun and having him lean against him. He thought for a moment, before saying enthusiastically, "I want to treat Chen Feng like our son. Is that all right with you?" Hung Jun replied, "Of course." Aside from Li Jinglong and Hung Jun, no one else in this world could say that they had such a deep connection with the Chen family. It was as if the moment that the heart lamp had come had determined that they would be fated to adopt the descendant of the Chen family. Hung Jun was gradually coming to feel that these countless complicated matters did seem to have the touch of fate upon them. "Why do you seem to be troubled by something again?" Hung Jun said, studying Li Jinglong. "It's okay," I said. "It's okay." Hung Jun thought that Li Jinglong was afraid that he wasn't willing to adopt Chen Feng, so he repeated his confirmation again. Li Jinglong smiled, a little helplessly, and said, "If humans are not troubled by the distant future, then there is something bothering them in the near future. That's how it is naturally." Hung Jun looked at Li Jinglong with suspicion, so Li Jinglong took his hand and gathered the exorcists for a meeting. Originally, Li Jinglong didn't want to bring back the suggestion to search for the 6 artifacts so soon, but every day that the devil seed was not dealt with, it hung over him like a sword dangling over his head, and he didn't know when it would fall. As of now, however, discussing this topic was a much more relaxed affair than before. At least he wouldn't have to avoid Hung Jun, and figuring out how to hunt down Xiaoyu was something that didn't involve endangering Hung Jun's life any longer either. Once again, Li Jinglong sketched out a simple map of the Great Tang and matched up the 6 symbols: the lake, the door, the eye, the slope, the moon, and the river. Of those 6, the lake was the sword of wisdom, the door was the Yao binding rope at the bottom of the dragon subduing tower, and the moon was on the lone peak of Siwei. They could eliminate the 3 that had already been found, and based on the hypothesis of the group not so long ago, the rest of them could basically be matched up as well. The Yao binding rope should have belonged to Yangxi at first, Li Jinglong said, but Hung Jun took it, which is to say that Yangxi has to go find Hung Jun's. Mo Rijin added, "The moon eclipse bow was located where I was born." "That's right," Li Jinglong replied. "That means, whose was it that was in the water channel of Lake Poyang, where the sword of wisdom was stored?" No one was born on Lake Poyang, and when Li Jinglong asked that question, they looked at each other questioningly. "Let's not mind the sword of wisdom for now," Li Jinglong continued. "Tagla, where were you born?" "Atai." Atai replied, "To tell you the truth, I was born in Luoyang." Upon hearing those words, everyone was stunned. Li Jinglong suddenly remembered that the last successor in name to the Sasanian Empire had come to the Central Plains to request troops from Li Longji right around the time that Atai was born. Later, my royal father and my royal mother left to do battle with the Abbasids, and upon seeing that there was no hope of winning, entrusted me to my teacher, Atai explained. "That's why, I think, Zenshi, our initial guess was correct. There must have once been an artifact hidden deep in the earth vein under the Longmen Mountains. This had truly become a thorny issue. The artifact was no longer there, so who could have taken it away with them? Hung Jun. Li Jinglong." Chen Feng's crisp voice shouted. "Don't make a ruckus," Hung Jun said to Chen Feng. "We're currently in a meeting." Li Jinglong said to Chen Feng, "It's Dad." Chen Feng was stunned for a moment, and everyone began to chuckle. Expressionlessly, Lu Su said, his voice filled with vinegar, "Congratulations, you now have one more son." Chen Feng grew a little nervous, but when he understood, he turned to Hung Jun and said, "Dad. Call me Dad." Li Jinglong was torn between laughing and crying. "Then what do I call him?" As soon as Chen Feng interrupted, everyone found themselves unable to continue their discussion. This little guy was really smart. "Call him Mom," Li Jinglong said. Hung Jun interrupted decisively, "Call me Xiao Dad." Everyone exploded into laughter. Xiao Dad, in Chang'an, was a way to insult someone, and Li Jinglong immediately said, "You can't call him that. Call him what you will, but hurry up and get out of here for now." Hung Jun. Hung Jun. The Carpiao seemed to have discovered something impossible once again, and it was reacting dramatically to it, shouting as it ran into the room. "Stop being so noisy." Lu Su was currently hugging his knees, deep in thought. Mo Rijin said, "It didn't have much to do with us in the first place. The moon eclipse Bao is here already, and the other artifacts won't go with Lu Su anyway, so why don't the two of us go back to our room first? The days are still long before us." Li Jinglong was torn between laughing and crying. "What are you in such a rush for? Even if we go by water, it'll still take us half a month, so we have a lot of time." As long as Li Jinglong couldn't figure out the whereabouts of the 6 artifacts, he couldn't rest easy. It was right then, however, that the Carpiao came dashing in, shouting, "Hung Jun! Hung Jun!" Chen Feng also came in, shouting, "Hung Jun! Hung Jun!" The room was immediately filled with a ruckus, and Hung Jun, feeling his head ache from the shouting, said, "All of you, stop." Qiu Yongxi suddenly said, "Oh, Brother Long? Do you still remember where you were born?" The Carpiao replied, "I was but a single egg, without any parents to speak of." "Are you dumb? How would I know where I was born?" Lu Su wailed, "No way. You think it's really it?" The Carpiao, "Hung Jun. Hurry and help me take a look." The Carpiao turned around and lifted its tail, saying, Why do I feel like I've grown longer?" Everyone. It was only then that Hung Jun realized the Carpiao seemed to be a little different. The Carpiao asked anxiously, "Can you see the difference?" Lu Su replied, "I can't." "Zhao Zilong, is it really appropriate for you to point your thing at everyone?" The Carpiao immediately yelped and ducked behind Hung Jun. A fish's butt was under its tail, and the Carpiao, in its moment of haste, had actually forgotten to cover up. Everyone immediately said understandingly, "I didn't see it. I didn't see anything." Hung Jun said, "Come climb on my back and I'll check." Hung Jun was very used to carrying the Carpiao, which just so happened to be a little longer than 2 chi in length. He hadn't measured how long it was exactly though. The Carpiao said, 2 chi and 2 kun. "Look, how about now?" Even without measuring, Hung Jun also found that the Carpiao's body seemed to have been stretched a little longer. It was originally in the shape of a carp, but now that its tail had stretched, it actually looked a little like. "Like what?" the Carpiao asked anxiously. "What does everyone think I look like?" "Like a grass carp," everyone said in unison. The Carpiao. "Could you be turning into a dragon?" Hung Jun was very astonished, and the Carpiao lay back down on the table. This fish was always impolite, and it reached out its hairy arms and legs. As it beckoned the exorcists to study its naked body, it said, "Everyone, come help me check." Everyone was at a loss for words for a moment. Li Jinglong couldn't bear it any longer. "Zhao Zilong, get out of here. Once I see the Kun god again, I'll go ask him," Hung Jun hurriedly promised. "It's probably that you've accumulated the maximum amount of merits." "But I haven't done anything yet," "Have I?" the carp Yao said. "Have I saved 100 people?" Qiu Yangxi replied, "Perhaps. This battle that we fought had some millions of people involved. Why don't we do this? Go back and lay down properly in your basin for now. If you want to turn into a dragon, you must cleanse your heart of any impurities that lie within, so that your heart can align with the heavens. You must pay special attention to removing any distracting thoughts and focus on sensing the changes happening throughout your body and wait for your dragon horns to appear. In a bit, when something happens, give us a shout so that we'll go and name you. How's that sound?" The carp Yao hurried to agree. Qiu Yangxi often struck deals with dragons, so naturally the carp Yao held a deep belief in his words, and it pattered away again. Once the carp Yao had been successfully dealt with, everyone finally let out a breath of relief. They no longer needed to argue until their heads spun. Li Jinglong said, "Then, let us continue." But before he could finish, Chen Feng said, "Hung Jun. It's my turn now." Li Jinglong. This was the first time that Li Jinglong was being a dad after living for so many years, and he originally wanted to make Chen Feng hush, but he had a flash of inspiration. Being a father, he had to study hard as well, because teaching benefited not only the students but also the teachers. He therefore had no choice but to keep quiet. Hung Jun, however, asked, "What's wrong?" "Look." Chen Feng pulled out the phoenix from his arms. Upon seeing his movements, everyone was so frightened their souls left their bodies, if only because the way that Chen Feng pulled the phoenix out was as if he was grabbing a little chicken. He grabbed the phoenix right under its two wings and forcibly produced it. "Don't." Hung Jun almost wet himself from the fright of that. If Chongming had been yanked like this by a human in the past, he might have spewed a mouthful of blazing flames and torched all of Chang'an. Gui Lai opened its eyes. "And it's also paying attention to me," Chen Feng exclaimed. The unexpected thing was that when Chen Feng placed the fledgling phoenix down on the table, it swept its steely gaze over the assembled group, before turning its gaze right back onto Chen Feng. "How did you make it open its eyes?" Hung Jun asked, astonished. With words and gestures, Chen Feng explained the process. He had plucked a basketful of leaves by the prow of the boat and was originally planning on feeding these to Gui Lai, but this divine bird had no interest in those leaves. Instead, it swallowed the dewdrops on the leaves, before then opening one eye and glancing at Chen Feng. After that, no matter how Chen Feng disturbed it, Gui Lai did not get angry. Hung Jun said, "I understand. It's a little thirsty, so it's best to go find it something to eat." Speaking of which, it was a pity that Hung Jun actually couldn't figure out how to look after this phoenix. Qiu Yangxi continued, "Feng er, it hatched not too long ago, so you must climb into the bed and hug it. That way, it feels as if it's still in the nest, and as the days pass, it'll learn your scent and treat you as its friend." Chen Feng nodded at that, and Qiu Yangxi said, "You must hug it for 2 whole shishan without moving." Chen Feng said, "Then I'll be going now." And with that, Chen Feng left as well. The group finally let out a breath in relief. Thank the heavens, only Qiu Yangxi was used to lying to children and carp. Otherwise, if they had started arguing, they wouldn't have been able to get anything else done today. End chapter.